Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Chloe, and I'm with the Tri-County Regional Energy Network. And today we have Russ King from Coded Energy joining us today to lead a training on understanding HERS registries for building departments. And before I pass things off to Russ for today's training, I have a few opening slides to go over. Go on to the next slide. Thank you. Great. Please make sure that you're on mute for the duration of this training. If you have any questions that come up, feel free to pop them in the chat and Russ will get to them as he's moving through his slides. We'll also try to leave some time at the end for an open question answer portion. So if you have any questions that are more discussion based, feel free to bring them up at the end. The session is being recorded. The recording and slides will be shared with you over email in the next few days. I'll also be launching a survey at the end of this training. All feedback is used to help us inform future events like this one. So if you have ideas for things you'd like to see in the future, it's really helpful for us if you can fill the survey out. You can go on the next slide, Russ. Thanks. Before we get rolling, just a few words about who we are. We are the Tri-County Regional Energy Network, aka 3CREN. 3CREN is funded by ratepayer dollars that we all pay into in our utility bills through the public goods charge. The benefit of being ratepayer funded is that there is no cost to those we serve. And as a regional energy network, we are able to return these dollars back to our local economy, which has historically missed out on some of these funds. You can go on to the next slide. 3CREN currently offers 6 programs focused around 3 services. These include incentives, training, and technical support. Today's training is provided by our Energy Code Connect program. To learn more about our programs and see other events, you can visit 3c-ren.org. And with that, I'll pass things off to Russ for today's training. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your day today to come and listen to this information. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Russ King. I'm a longtime trainer for a lot of the RENs and the energy code stuff. Most of my background is residential HVAC design, but I also spent a big chunk of my career training HERS raters. And so I know a bit about this program. The HERS industry took a beating over the last couple of years for a variety of reasons, but it's still going pretty strong. It has evolved a lot over the years. I'll give you a little bit of a history of it on one of the slides, but I think it's one of the most important aspects of enforcement of the energy code. So if your building department is serious about enforcing the energy code, I seriously suggest that you consider working very closely with HERS raters and getting to use the HERS registry. In my opinion, the HERS registry is probably the single best tool there is for helping enforce the energy code. It's a huge thing. If any of you were around back in the 2008 code when everything was handwritten and you had to pass paper around to everybody, that was a nightmare. That was an absolute nightmare. In the 2013 code, everything went all electric, and they came up with the HERS registries, which are basically online databases where you can track all the forms. And it's amazing. If you use it correctly, it is a truly amazing tool. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. And oh, by the way, this class was developed by BayREN and is being presented in cooperation with BayREN. Today's learning objectives is to understand what the HERS program is related to the energy code, to understand how HERS verification fits into the overall compliance process, understand when a project is required to be registered with the HERS provider, understand how to find a project in the HERS registry, understand how to use the HERS registry to track all the compliance documents. Okay. If you know anything about the energy code, you know there's lots and lots of forms. It is based on forms. The good news is they're 100% electronic now, which is great. And then to understand how to use the HERS registry to save time on field inspections. Okay. All right. So Home Energy Rating System. That's what HERS stands for. Home Energy Rating System. It is a long-standing training and certification program for the field verification of energy measures. Okay, so the whole concept is you've got a house that's got some energy measures in it, and you have these experts who go out to the house and make sure those features are not just installed correctly, but operating correctly. Okay, things like airflow and refrigerant charge and fan watt draw and duct leakage and all that other good stuff. Okay, that's what HERS raters do. The program started. A long time ago. I'll get to that on my next slide. I'm getting ahead of myself. Um, but the people doing these verifications are called HERS raters. Okay, those are the people, and it's a little bit of a misnomer at this time. Um, the organizations that train and track these HERS raters are called HERS providers. Okay, right now there's one big provider called Cheers and one small provider that just got certified. And I'm not sure what their exact status is, but they just got certified. And my understanding is that they're only going to do alterations, and it's going to be very kind of focused on certain projects. So you may or may not see any from the new HERS provider for a while. The energy features that have been delegated to the HERS raters are called HERS measures. Okay. So when we say HERS measure, we're talking about an energy feature that does not get inspected by the building inspector, it gets inspected by a HERS rater. The other features, we call those non-HERS measures, and those are the responsibility of the building inspector, okay? Those are pretty easy things like window U factor and solar heat gain coefficient, water heater information, lighting, stuff like that. Building inspectors can go out and check. But some of the other stuff, especially the stuff that requires special equipment like a duct blaster or a blower door or refrigerant gauges and stuff like that, those have all been delegated to HERS raters to do those tests and inspections. Okay. All right. So the term home energy rating system comes from a very different program that started way back in the 1990s. I helped start the very first home energy rating system in California. And it's always been a bit of a misnomer to call it a rating system because today HERS raters aren't rating system. Back in the day, what it was for was to give a house a score. So you'd had an existing house, you go out to this house, you do a bunch of tests and inspections on this house, and you would give it a score so that people could compare its energy efficiency to other houses that have a similar score. And that's where the term rating comes from. Home energy rating system. So it was to rate a house on how energy efficient it was. Well, we were training these people how to do all these tests, blower door, duct leakage, all these tests, and they would go out and testing these houses, and there was utility programs who would give you incentives for improving your score and stuff like that. Well, in the I want to say the late 90s, the energy code started encouraging energy features that weren't simply labeled like a efficiency of a water heater or a window, and required some tests. And the Energy Commission was proposing things like duct leakage testing and blower door testing. And I remember being at the actual hearing at the Energy Commission when this came up, and someone from the building code enforcement, Calbo, raised their hand and says, "Who's going to be doing these tests? You really want building inspectors to carry around all this equipment?" And they said that ain't going to happen. And so they came up with an alternative proposal, which was to basically create a group of special inspectors specifically for the energy code. And they said, "Well, who can we do this? Are there people out there that can do this?" And they said, "Yeah, there's these people called HERS raters. Let's just have them do it. They've already been trained, and there's always a training program established for them." And so that's what happened. They took these people that were doing these energy ratings and they brought them over and trained them to be special inspectors. And the weird thing is that the name stuck, the rating. So they came over, but when they inspect for the energy code, they're not rating anything. They're passing it or failing it. Okay. They're testing it, inspecting it, and passing or failing. They're not giving it a 90 or an 80 or anything like that. Okay. Um, and so finally, after all these years, the Energy Commission has decided to stop calling them HERS raters and they're going to call them energy code compliance raters. All right. And so in the new code that starts on January 1st of next year, they're going to stop calling them HERS raters and start calling them energy code compliance raters. But the funny thing is that the misnomer term of rating is sticking with them. And so, anyways, long story. So there'll be a period of time where they'll say, oh, ECC rater, formerly known as HERS rater, or ECC provider, formerly known as HERS provider, and stuff like that. So there'll be a transition period. Okay. But until then, we're still going to call it the HERS program until the end of the year. Okay. So what exactly is a HERS registry then? A registry is a list. Okay. It's a database. And before a HERS provider can get approved and certified by the Energy Commission, they have to demonstrate that their HERS registry, that they have a HERS registry and that it performs in appropriate ways. So that's a big process they have to go through. But a registry is an online database that allows people to come in and look at a project. Okay, a project is an address, it's a house, okay, or a building. All right, and someone goes in and starts a project in the HERS registry and then invites other people or gives them permission to see that project. Okay. A homeowner can start a project. A HERS rater can start a project. A general contractor can start a project. Anyone can start a project and invite people to see that project. But the whole purpose, the entire purpose of a HERS registry is for the building departments to see that information. It is a central repository of all the information, purely and 100% exists because building departments need to see that information. Okay. And so all these other people put information into the registry purely so building departments have access to it. Okay. That's the purpose of a HERS registry. As soon as a project goes into a registry and gets, designated as being under a certain building department, that building department doesn't have to do anything. They can see that project. So as a building department, you get special permission when you log into the HERS registry, and then you see every single project that's registered in your building department. Okay. And so all you have to do is get a username and a password. Okay. And you log into to the HERS registry, you search by address, and you find your project, and it's going to have everything all spelled out nicely for you to see. Okay. So very, very important, very, very convenient, very, very powerful. All right. So you can track the status of a project from start to finish. Once a project is in the registry, it can be seen by anyone who's been invited, plus the building department, whether they got invited or not, they can see it. Okay. It is common for documents and requirements to change as a project progresses. Okay. I'm sure a lot of you have seen, they're building a house and they get halfway through and they have to make a big change. And so they rerun the Title 24 calculations. They upload the new CF1R, a bunch of energy features change. All right. The best way to find out what the current status is to go into the registry. By definition, what's in the registry is the most current data, information, and requirements for that project. Okay. The registry keeps track of all that stuff for you. All right. So no more paper is required for any registered project, unless, of course, your building department prefers hard copies for tracking purposes. That's okay. But you don't have to. You can do the entire energy code process from start to finish without ever printing out a piece of paper. Okay. Anyone can register a project with a HERS provider, even a homeowner. Anyone can be given access to view the status of the project electronically, and a project can be viewed in the field with a smartphone or a tablet. All you need is internet access. Okay, so it's very powerful tool. All right, so the first thing we have to do is categorize the building types. Okay, because the energy features that a building needs depends on the type of building that it is, and so that it's in this was a new change in the 2022 code, that they've separated low-rise multifamily from single family and all this other stuff. So let's talk about that first. So in the 2022 Energy Code, there was a significant change to how building types were organized. Okay. So first of all, there's single family residential. That's pretty straightforward. Single family residential, except that it includes duplexes and townhomes, which is unusual. But those are all considered single family. And then you've got low rise multifamily. All right. It has its own code sections and now it has its own forms. Okay. So the compliance documentation, the forms are labeled in a way so that you can tell which kind of project that it applies to. So the single family forms have not changed. They're all the CF forms, CF1R, CF2R, CF3R. Okay. The new forms are the LRC forms, low rise multifamily residential, and high rise residential. High rise multifamily falls under non residential commercial. Okay. All right. So the big change was to break out low rise residential into its own category. That was the big change for the 2022 code. So when a project requires at least one HERS verified feature, a CF1R certificate of compliance, and all other forms must be registered with a provider. Okay. So that's the first thing is, does this project need any HERS measures at all? Okay. So new construction will always have at least one HERS measures. HVAC changeouts will usually, I would say 95% of the time, HVAC changeouts will usually have at least one HERS measure. So they'll have to be registered with the HERS provider. Okay. The kind of projects that don't typically need to be registered are things like re-roofing, window replacements, water heat replacements, smaller alterations to existing buildings that don't touch the HVAC system. Okay. Most additions will probably need a HERS, at least one HERS measure. And so they'll have to be HERS registered with the HERS provider. So a HERS registry is an online database that generates the CF1R, CF2R, and CF3R documents for a registered project. So if you see a printed out or a PDF of a form of a registered document, that form came from the registry. It was generated by the registry. Okay, so you can always go into the registry to see those directly. Um, this allows all interested parties the ability to create a form, to complete a form, to sign a form, and to view all the forms just by going into the registry. Okay, so it's super, super powerful. And the reason this is so, amazing to me is because we used to have to do it the old way, which was to do it by hand. And you had a stack of paper and you had to go get the insulation installer to sign their part and the window installer to sign their part and the HERS rater had to fill out their forms and it was a mess. Okay. But now it's all electronic. It's all in one spot. Okay. So good stuff. All right. So it will be rare for projects not to require any HERS verification. Forms for non-HERS projects must be tracked manually. So a non-HERS project would be something like a water heater replacement. Okay. They can be hard copies or electronic copies, but the electronic files will not reside in a central location like they do for projects that are registered with the HERS registry. Okay. Um, the following residential projects all require HERS verification and therefore must be registered with the HERS provider. Any new construction house, okay? A new construction house has some things that are required always and must always be verified by a HERS rater. Okay, so any new construction project, any addition over 1,000 square feet must be registered with the HERS provider. Any addition or alteration that involves one of the following things: replacing or adding an air conditioning condenser, an air conditioning coil, an air handler, such as a furnace, or 25 or more feet of duct. Okay. Any of those things will trigger HERS verification. There are some exceptions to these, okay, but not very many. There's a whole class on alterations to existing homes, by the way, okay, that goes into a lot more detail on the exceptions and stuff like that. Okay. All right. Now, low-rise multifamily projects will be treated very similar to single-family residential projects, except that the forms have different names. Okay. So the CF1R for single family, they have something called the LMCC, the CF2R, the LMCI, and the CF3R, the LMCV. Okay. Now the CF1R, if you'll recall, is called the Certificate of Compliance. The CF2R is called the Certificate of Installation, and the CF3R is called the Certificate of Verification. They just took those names. So here's Certificate of Compliance, Certificate of Installation, Certificate of Verification. Okay, that's how they named it, slightly different. Okay, non-residential, such as offices, non-residential portions, I should say, of a low-rise multifamily building, that's treated like commercial stuff. Okay. So the office, the workout rooms, the laundry areas, the common areas, things like that in a low-rise multifamily project get treated as commercial space. All right. So they will have their own forms called NRCC, NRCI, NRCV, and NRCA. Okay. So it's getting very complicated. The good news is, at least for low rise and single family, is the forms are all tracked by the registry. Okay. For non-residential, it gets a lot more complicated because there is no non-residential registry at this time. Okay. There's a registry for the acceptance tests, but there's not a registry for the other stuff yet. Okay. As of April 1st, 2024, low-rise multifamily projects that have at least one HERS measure must be registered with a HERS provider. Okay, they've got their forms. There was a time there was a period where the registries weren't ready for that. Well, they've been ready for over a year. Okay, all right. For non-residential projects, there are some similarities between the HERS testing forms and in the acceptance testing. Okay, on the commercial side, we start talking about big commercial buildings, office buildings, things like that. Um, they've made some exceptions to the third party verification process. And so they have a thing called acceptance testing. And in single family and low rise multifamily, they call it HERS testing. So there's HERS testing and acceptance testing. I call acceptance testing HERS Light. Okay. It's like the HERS program, but the person doing the test does not have to be third party. They have to be trained, they have to be certified, but they can also be the installer. That is not allowed in the residential side. Okay. It must be a third party person doing the test. Acceptance testing can be done by the installer if they're certified, or it can be done by a third party. That's fine. There is no non-residential registry that helps you determine what forms there are required, like there is for residential, unfortunately. If non-residential forms are required, only the NRCV forms need to be registered with the HERS provider. So there are a few HERS tests on the commercial side that cannot be acceptance tests. Okay. Um, the following features required HERS verification on non-multifamily, non-residential, so commercial buildings. Okay. Duct leakage. If modeled for performance, duct leakage must be tested by a HERS rater in the commercial side. Duct leakage, if required by the prescriptive approach, also has to be tested by a HERS rater. So basically, duct leakage. All right. So I'm not sure why duct leakage is the one feature that only requires third-party verification, but it is on the commercial side. Okay. High-rise residential, more than 3 stories, is considered non-residential. All right. And so they have their own HERS tests because it is a residential space in a high rise residential commercial building. Okay. They have their own tests. NRCV for enclosure air leakage. That's a blower door test on the apartments. Mechanical ventilation, central hot water system distribution, single dwelling hot water system distribution. So those tests for high-rise residential are done by HERS raters. Okay. All right. So don't worry if you didn't catch all that. By the way, you'll get copies of all these slides. This is actually we're just kind of talking about the different kinds of buildings here. We're not really talking about the HERS registry at this point. Okay. All right. So one of the things we like to do is look at the overall compliance process and kind of get the 10,000-foot view of the process. And then when we dive into it, it kind of gives you a better perspective of where we fit and what we're talking about. Okay. Um, looks like Rebecca is having technical issues. Let's
I'm
see if
still seeing slides. If anyone else is not able to see the slides, can you react to Rebecca's post and we can try to figure out what the problem is?
looks like Paula's not seeing.
Okay. I think the one that I have. We are sending out a copy of the recording and the slides. You'll get those in the next couple of days.
Okay.
Russ, you could try unsharing and then sharing again.
Yeah, let's do that. See if that works.
Sorry, guys. I'll try to figure this out.
The reconcile and discrepancy between what was on Carl's output file and what we have.
Okay, how about now? Oops, how about now?
I've been focusing on.
I'm seeing it.
Okay, somebody's seen it.
Okay, Rebecca is seeing it. We're seeing it. Okay, great. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
good.
Thanks for bearing with us.
Yep, thank you guys. Okay, so the compliance process, the big picture. Let's look at the big picture. So the first thing to understand about the energy code that's kind of interesting is there are two paths you can take. All right. If you come to this fork in the road, let's say you're building a house and you're trying to decide how do I get it to comply with the energy code. All right. There's a fork in the road and you have to decide which path you're going to take. There's the easy path and there's the complicated path. The easy path is the prescriptive path, and it's a list. Just follow this list and you'll meet the energy code. It's that simple. All right. The problem is it's very, very strict. There is no design flexibility. You have to build the house a certain way, a certain kind of wall, a certain kind of roof, certain kind of windows, certain kind of attic, a certain amount of windows. Okay. Um, and as it turns out, people who are building a new house from scratch don't like the prescriptive path. They choose the other path. They choose the more complicated path. And the reason is because it's way more flexible. As it turns out, 99.999% of all new construction uses the performance path. And the reason it's more complicated is because you usually have to hire an energy consultant who has this software program that they can model the house, and the model will tell you whether or not the house meets the energy code or not. Okay. So the vast majority of new homes use the performance path. The prescriptive path is generally reserved for alterations, things like HVAC changeouts and smaller additions. Okay. That's just kind of how it's evolved to be. Um, when you run the performance approach and you use the software generates a file that gets uploaded to the HERS registry. That HERS registry will then create the CF1R, and it uses that information to create a project list of all the tests that need to be done for that house. And that's all in the registry. So as soon as that CF1R gets uploaded to the registry, that the registry now knows which forms need to be filled out. Okay. And it creates a list that's custom to that project. Okay. All right. So here's the prescriptive. Remember, I said there's a list. Okay. In the prescriptive approach, there's a list of things you have to do. Here's the list. Okay. It's called table 150.1-A. All right. And it's by climate zone. So there's 16 columns. You find your climate zone, you do that. But it turns out people building a new house don't like this list. Okay. It's very difficult to make a house meet the requirements using the prescriptive approach. The performance approach uses a software program. They model the house, they change the features until the software says, yep, you pass. And then they generate this file. And this file gets uploaded to the HERS registry. And now the HERS registry knows everything it needs to know about that project. Okay. What features are going in, what tests need to be done, and what forms need to be filled out. All right. And there's a report called the project status report. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but um, that comes out of the registry. So mandatory measures must always be met. All right, that's just something you always have to do. So mandatory measures kind of come first. They're sort of the umbrella over everything, and then you pick your path. Okay, your performance path, your prescriptive path. All right. Um, This is a nice little diagram that we use to sort of illustrate the energy code compliance process. And if you'll notice, there's 3 basic steps. There's 3 important steps when you comply with the energy code. Okay. You can say the energy code is as simple as 1, 2, 3. Okay. The first step, figure out what you're supposed to do. All right. You're building a house. You want to get to comply with the energy code. You got to figure out what you're supposed to do. You got to figure out what energy features you need to put in it. That's the first step. The second step, put those features in the house, install those features. And then the third step is have somebody check it. Have somebody check it to make sure it was installed correctly and make sure it was operating correctly. You can think of that as like commissioning or something. Okay. All right. So step 1, figure out what you're supposed to do. Well, that's this part up here. All right. Let's look at that a little more closely. Step 1, figure out what you're supposed to do. That goes into plan check. They look at it. Step 2, install those things. That's where the field inspector comes in. And step 3, have somebody check it. That's where the HERS rater comes in. So those 3 steps, figure out what you're supposed to do it, have somebody check it. Those are facilitated by 3 forms, 3 kinds of forms called, guess what? The CF1R, the CF2R, and the CF3R. The CF1R tells you what you're supposed to do. The CF2R documents what actually got installed. The CF3R is the HERS rater's information. They're showing that something passed the inspection or the test. Okay. The forms are designed to follow that 3-step process. Okay. Let's look at step 1. So you figure out what you're supposed to do and you figure out which path you're going to take, either performance or prescriptive. The energy features are determined by the software in the performance approach and determined by the tables if you use a prescriptive approach. Either way, you're going to end up with a CF1R, Certificate of Compliance. It's going to tell you what features you need to put in that house. Okay. Under the performance approach, that's electronic. It gets uploaded to the registry, like I said. For the prescriptive approach, you can fill those out in the registry. You can go into the registry and enter the information directly into the registry. Okay. So you got step 1 is taken care of. Figure out what you're supposed to do. All right. If the project requires plans, like a new construction house or an addition to a house or a major remodel where there's plans, you want to make sure that all that information gets on the plans, because that's where the trades are going to look. That's the plumber is going to look for a water heater. They're not going to look in this 16-page CF1R. They're going to look on the plans to see what it is. So that information needs to get on the plans. Okay. Plan checker looks at it, says everything looks great. By the way, there's a class on this, the new construction class, and how to plan check plans versus the CF1R is what that class is all about. But anyways, the permit gets issued. All right, then they start building the house. So let's go to steps 2 and 3. Step 2 is to document what was installed in the house. Think of the CF2R. It's called the Certificate of Installation. The CF2R is filled out and signed by the installer. Think of the CF2R as a signed affidavit by the installer saying they put in the right stuff. Okay. So the installer is saying, yep, I know what I was supposed to install. Here's what it is. And it meets the requirements. Okay. What that does is it puts the responsibility on them, and the accountability is on them. Interesting history behind the CF2R. It used to be called something else, but it was actually the building industry asked for the CF2R. The general contractors, the big production home builders, they got tired of getting in trouble for their subcontractors not putting in the right energy features. And so they lobbied the Energy Commission and says, hey, we need a way for our subcontractors to be responsible for what they're supposed to put in. And they came up with the CF2R. So the window installer fills out a CF2R saying what windows they put in, and they sign it saying they put in the right windows. Okay. Now, that's not a guarantee that they put in the right stuff, but at least they're assuming responsibility for it. And we understand that building inspectors can't see every single feature. So at the very, very least, what they should do is make sure those CF2Rs get signed. Okay. If the building inspector cannot see every single energy feature in the house, at least they should make sure the CF2Rs get signed so they know who's responsible for those things if they turn out not to be correct. Okay. So every feature in the house, whatever it says on the CFR, let's say we're building a new house and there's 50 energy features. 30 of those energy features are going to be HERS measures and about 20 are going to be non-HERS measures. So they get broken into two categories. Measures that are going to be inspected by the HERS rater and measures that are going to be inspected by the building inspector. Okay. Both kinds of measures get a CF2R. A CF2R is signed by the installer. Okay. Whether it's going to be checked by the HERS rater or not, they still get a CF2R. Okay. Then the HERS measures get a third form, the CF3R. Because the inspection is being done by somebody else, the building department needs documentation that it was done. And that's the CF3R. The non-HERS measures, okay, are verified by the building inspector. They still get a CF2R signed by the installer, but there's no CF3R because it's the building inspector that does that inspection. If the building inspector wants to create their own form to fill out, they're more than welcome to, but they don't have to. Okay. But the HERS rater needs a form. The HERS rater needs a form to fill out so that the building inspector can make sure it got done correctly. So here's the building inspector. Their job is to inspect these features, but their job should also be to make sure that all these forms get signed. And how do they do that? The HERS Registry helps them do that. Makes it very, very easy to do that. Okay. All right. So let's talk about all the compliance forms. So I've already talked about CF2Rs for non-HERS measures, or for HERS measures. By the way, those end in an H, which stands for HERS rater. The non-HERS measures, there's CF2Rs, and then there's CF3Rs. Oh, and there's CF1Rs. Okay. Lots of forms. Lots and lots and lots of forms. Okay. This is Appendix A from the Residential Compliance Manual. Appendix A has samples of all the forms. The table of contents for Appendix A is 3 pages long. That's when you know you're in trouble. Okay. There's the table of contents for Appendix A, which is all the compliance documents. The table of contents is 3 pages long. That's when you know there's a lot of forms. Okay. And so just kind of glancing at this, you can see there's lots of CF1R forms, all different kinds of CF1Rs, depending on the kind of project. Okay. Is it an addition? Is it new construction? Is it an alteration? Is it an HVAC alteration? They all get their own kind of CF1R form. You can't see it here, but then it goes into a whole bunch of CF2R forms. All right. And then there's a whole bunch of CF3R forms. All right. Lots and lots and lots of forms. How do you keep track of all these forms? How do you know which forms are even required? How, if they are required, how do you know when they get filled out and signed? The registry does it for you. The registry keeps track of all this stuff. Okay. So as far as CF1Rs go, there's the CF1R Perfo one. That's the performance one. There's this very, very rare new construction building for prescriptive. You'll see additions, CF1R ADD. All right. That's not for people with attention deficit disorder. That's for additions. Okay. And then for existing buildings and alterations, you'll see the CF1R Alt. Alt stands for alterations. And then the Alto 2 is an alt form they made just for HVAC stuff. So there used to be an Alto 1 that had everything, but there's so many projects that only have HVAC changeouts, they decided to give them their own forms, and that's called the Alto 2, okay? So this is generated by an energy consultant. It gets uploaded to the registry, and now the registry knows everything about the project. These other forms get filled out in the registry. They go to the registry and they type in the information. Okay. So that's what starts the process. That's what starts the process for a, oops, I turned off my chat. Let me make sure everyone's got it. Good. Slides on. Okay, good. Awesome. All right. So CF1Rs. Okay. There are some worksheets for prescriptive projects. You don't see these too often. Unfortunately, they also call those CF1Rs, but don't worry too much about those. Now we get into the 2Rs, the certificates of installation, filled out and signed by the installers so that they're being accountable for the features in that project. Okay. There's a whole bunch of these. These are the non-HERS measures. These are the measures that are inspected by the building inspector. Okay. Envelope stuff, fenestration, insulation, roofing, lighting stuff, the basic mechanical system, making sure it meets the efficiencies and the type and all that stuff. Whole house fans, not too common, but that's inspected by the building inspector. Evaporative coolers, not too common, especially in your area on the coast. On the desert, they have quite a few evaporative coolers. Central fan ventilation cooling system, kind of an unusual thing. PV systems. All new homes need a PV system. Those are inspected by the building inspector. Those were originally proposed to be a HERS feature, but the Energy Commission decided otherwise. Okay. And now they are required to be inspected by the building inspector. And then a bunch of plumbing stuff. Okay. So these are all CF2Rs filled out by the installer, documenting that they put in the right stuff. This is all happens in the registry. The building inspector is going to check these things, okay, and also make sure that these forms get filled out and signed by looking in the registry. If you can't inspect these things for some reason, if a building inspector doesn't have a chance to look at the water heater, okay, the next best thing is to make sure that the CF2R for the water heater gets filled out. Okay. These are HERS measures. Okay. These are non-HERS measures. There's even more HERS measures. Okay. So these are all things that the HERS rater will verify, but the installer still needs to say they put in the right stuff. The installer still needs to sign a document saying they put in the right stuff. Okay. So this is just a bunch of examples. There's a whole bunch of mechanical stuff. There's some insulation stuff. There's sealed ducts, fan watt draw, system airflow, refrigerant charge, all this other stuff. Kitchen ventilation, return duct filter size grills, all this stuff is all documented by the installer and verified by the HERS rater. Okay. So when the HERS rater goes out and does their verification, guess what? There's another form, the CF3R. Okay. So I'm going to go back a slide. All these CF2Rs that end in an H, there is a matching CF3R. So let's look at this one. CF2R MEC 20-H. CF2Rs, it means it's filled out by the installer, the certificate of installation. All right. The installer says, yep, I sealed the ducts. The HERS rater comes out and tests the ducts. They fill out a CF3R MEC 20 and say, I tested the ducts and they passed. Okay, that's how it works. So clearly, there's lots and lots of forms. And like I said, we used to do this all by hand. We used to keep track of these were all hard copies we had to keep track of. Now they all live in the registry. And by the way, there are some low-rise multifamily forms. They look very, very similar. Okay. And in the non-residential side, there's no registry for that. So that all has to be done by hand, the old-fashioned way. But the HERS forms, this NRCVs, the duct leakage testing, those other couple forms, those will get registered in the registry. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about HERS and residential HVAC alterations. Okay. Alterations. Those are the most common type of project that requires HERS verification. So, we'll send you some, we have a handout called suggested guidelines. We'll get that to you. So the first thing is to know as early as possible on a project. We're talking about HVAC changeouts. Okay. Someone's getting a new furnace, someone's getting a new air conditioner, someone's switching from gas furnace to heat pumps, all those kinds of permits that you guys see all the time. All right. You want to find out as early as possible whether HERS is required or not. Unfortunately, that's not what the code says. The code does not say that you have to fill out a CF1R in order to get a permit. Okay. You have to have a CF1R to finish a permit, but you don't have to have it at the beginning. All right. We suggest Bay Ren, 3C Ren, all the Rens, the utilities, the Energy Commission, we suggest that you require a CF1R at the beginning. If you go into the registry and you fill out a CF1R at the beginning, the registry will tell you what HERS tests that project needs. Okay. It's very, very unfortunate. It's getting less common, but it used to be very common that someone would, an HVAC contractor would go out and replace a furnace and then realize later, oh shoot, we were supposed to do something. And then they got to go back to the homeowner and say, oh, I'm sorry, we forgot to tell you we had to seal your ducts. Now you got to seal your ducts. That's going to cost more money, blah, blah, blah. The sooner you know that you have to do a HERS test, the better off you are. So we highly suggest that building departments require a CF1R before issuing a permit to do an HVAC changeout. And what that does is it forces it to go into the HERS registry as early as possible so that you can track it from day one. Okay. And the homeowner and everybody else knows what's required at that point. Okay. There's no surprises. Let's see. The CF1R is not required to issue a permit, but is required to close a permit. So might as well do it at the beginning is what we're getting at here. Okay. The HERS Provider Registry does an excellent job walking people through the process, just like TurboTax. Okay. A homeowner can go in and say, I'm getting a new HVAC system, and they can enter the project. And the registry will say, okay, what are you installing? What climate zone, what's your address? What building department? What are you installing? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? Where are your ducts? Are you replacing ducts? What kind of a system are you putting in? And then based on those questions, it'll tell the homeowner, okay, here's what you need to do. And it'll create a list. All right. The sooner that happens, the better everyone gets informed. Okay. It is recommended that all HVAC alterations start here. This will help the applicant determine whether or not HERS verification is required and what HERS tests and forms are required. All right. It provides online tracking of the process for all parties, including the building department, and it will generate a CF1R just for that project. Okay. That's good to have at the very, very beginning. Only projects that require HERS verification are required to be registered. This includes any alteration that involves the installation or replacement of the following. I mentioned these already. Okay. AC condenser, AC coil, package unit, an air handler, which is a furnace or a fan coil unit, any refrigerant containing component, or more than 25 feet of ducts. If part of your HVAC changeout involves any one of these things, and most of them do, okay, it's hard to have an HVAC changeout without changing your AC condenser or your air handler, okay. They all trigger HERS test, okay. Now there are some exceptions to the duct leakage test, okay. So if the only test that's triggered by this one of these changeouts is the duct leakage test, and there's an exception, then guess what? There's no HERS test on that project. Okay. So the exceptions to the duct leakage test are duct systems that are insulated or sealed with asbestos. All right. I personally think the Energy Commission chickened out on this one and punted and said, oh, we don't want to deal with that. So if they have asbestos, just don't worry about it. Go away, go away. Okay. But here's the problem. This, by the way, when they're filling out a project in the registry, there's little check boxes for these exceptions. And there's a little checkbox that says the system has asbestos. And they check that box. And guess what? Duct leakage goes away. So guess what happens? That little checkbox gets checked a lot when it shouldn't get checked. Okay. In other words, this asbestos exemption gets abused. Okay. So best practice, if you ever see a project where they claim to have asbestos, the building inspector needs to verify whether or not there's really asbestos there. Okay. A couple easy things to do: check the age of the house. If the house was built in the 80s, it probably does not have asbestos on it. Okay. If it was built in the 50s or 60s, it might. Okay. But you should check it. Okay. You should go out there and check it and poke your head up in the attic And the way it's worded is if the ducts are insulated or sealed with asbestos. So if you see asbestos ducts or asbestos tape on the ducts, fine, it has asbestos and they don't have to seal the ducts, okay? Another exception is ducts that have previously tested and verified. So let's say 2 years ago, they got a new furnace and they got their ducts tested. This year they get a new air conditioner. They don't have to test the ducts again, but they have to show you that it was previously tested, okay? And then the last exception is just really small duct systems, real small duct systems. They did a study and they showed that it's just not cost effective to have to go to the trouble to seal those ducts. So they're exempt. And a real small duct system is defined as a duct system with less than 40 feet, 40 linear feet of ducts. All right. So that's not that much. That's not that much duct. That's 4 10-foot runs. All right. So that could, an ADU may meet that requirement. Okay. A very small um, building may meet that requirement. Okay. Um, but all of these exceptions, especially the asbestos ones, need to be verified by the building inspector. Okay. There's also an exception to the refrigerant charge verification, and that's just what climate zone are you in. So the refrigerant charge verification is only required in climate zones 2 and 8 through 15. Okay. So projects not in those climate zones are exempt from the refrigerant charge verification. And we're only talking about HVAC alterations now. We're only talking about changeouts, prescriptive changeouts. Okay. Package units are another exception. A a package like a rooftop package unit or a package unit that's sitting on the ground, because those are charged in the factory, they don't have to be third party verified in the field. It's only split systems have to be third party verified. Okay, there's a package unit, there's a split system. Okay. So, what is the ideal process? What is the best case scenario in this whole process? The HVAC contractor goes and bids a project. They enter the project into the registry, and the registry tells them exactly what tests need to be done. So that could affect their bid, right? They need to know what tests are being done in order to give the homeowner a proper bid. So they can do that at the beginning before they even know they have the project. Okay, the registry will help them figure out. Now, after a while, they will get a feel for it, and maybe they don't have to do it. Okay, but when they win the bid, when they know for sure that they're going to be doing that project, that's when they really should enter it in for sure. Okay. Then it generates a CF1R. They sign it. Okay. Then they should take that to go get their permit. They get their permit with the CF1R. And by the way, a lot of this stuff can be done online. They don't have to go to the counter. Depends on the building department. But the registration of the CF1R is electronic, and so that can be transferred easily to the building department electronically. Okay. So anyways, they got their CF1R, tells them what they're supposed to do. Then they go do it. They install whatever equipment they say they're going to install. They're going to replace a furnace, or replace an air conditioner, they're going to replace a whole bunch of ducts. Okay. Then they fill out their CF2Rs saying they did it correctly. All right. We installed the right stuff. We sealed our ducts and all that other stuff. The HERS rater comes and performs their tests. Now, by the way, the HERS rater can help the installer fill out the forms. Okay. That's very common because a lot of contractors are intimidated by the forms. In order for them to get filled out, the HERS rater has to help them fill it out, but it's still signed. The signature on the CF2R is the installer's. Okay. Um, the HERS rater then does their test. They fill out their CF3Rs. Then the building inspector goes out, does their inspection, and then looks to make sure all the other forms got filled out. The 1R, the 2R, and the 3Rs. And they can do that on their phone. They can do it on a smartphone. All right. And once that all those forms are filled out, boom, they're done. They sign off on the project and they're good to go. Okay. The registry makes sure and makes it easy to tell which forms are required and which forms are filled out. And we'll give you some examples of that. So there's a process called sampling. All right. It was invented specifically for subdivisions and tract homes where you're building the same house over and over and over again. So the building industry, the big production home builders lobbied the Energy Commission and said, you know what, it's kind of a waste to have a HERS rater check every single house when they're all exactly the same. Let's come up with a process called sampling where we put houses into a group and the HERS rater randomly picks a house from that group. And if that house passes, they all pass. Okay. Very complicated. There are some very strict rules about how you do that, which houses go into a group. Guess what? The HERS registry keeps track of all that for you. They pick a group, they put it in, the HERS rater picks one. So all the building department needs to do is make sure that every house was part of a sample group and that the house that was picked in that group passed. And it's very easy to do in the registry. Okay. For some bizarre reason, they decided to allow sampling for HVAC changeouts. Okay. Um, but that is going away in 2025. It has been a big source of how should I say this? A source of cheating. Okay. And it doesn't make nearly as much sense to do sampling for changeouts as it does for subdivisions, because in a subdivision, all the houses are exactly the same. When you're doing change outs, you got very different houses, and it sampling just doesn't make quite as much sense. So that is going away in 2025. And by 2025, I mean the 2025 energy code, not the year. Okay. The 2025 code takes effect on January 1st of next year. Okay. But in all cases, every house must be tested by the installer. The house selected by the rater gets retested. Okay. The registry keeps track of all this for you. So don't sweat it. Let the rater, let the builder, let them worry about it. The registry will say whether the house passes or not. Okay. Okay. Best practices. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing great on time. Best practices for HERS and energy code enforcement. Do not accept unregistered CF1Rs for new construction. If it's a new construction house, I've heard that some people will submit an unregistered CF1R perf. Don't do that. A registered CF1R should have right now it should have the Cheers logo on the CF1R as a watermark. Okay. Make sure the project can be found in the appropriate registry. Okay. When you get a project, let's say it's a new construction, that's what we're talking about, new construction, you get a big fat set of plans, right? Many, many, many pages. Somewhere in those pages is going to be the CF1R certificate. Okay. Look on that certificate, make sure it's a registered document. It's got the Cheers watermark on it. And then very quickly, just takes 2 minutes, go to the Cheers registry and make sure you can find it in the registry. Okay. I'm not sure if this is an issue with Cheers, but it was a big issue with CalCerts that people would register a project with the wrong jurisdiction. They might say San Luis Obispo County instead of City of San Luis Obispo, and then the city couldn't find it. So if you go in, you can't find a project. There's a very good chance that it was registered in the wrong jurisdiction. So go in and find it. It just takes a couple minutes to do, and it's worth. And now you know it's in there. Now you know you can track it. Okay. Now, plan checkers. Check the plans. Make sure the plans match the CF1R. The CF1R is a big old document. It's going to be anywhere between 12 and 25 pages long. And it's going to list all the windows, all the walls, all the ceilings, all the floors. Okay. And the plan checker's job is to make sure that that huge list of windows, walls, floors, and ceilings matches the plans. We have a whole class on that. Okay. Um, and it's a time consuming thing to do. At the very, very, very least, check the windows. Okay. The windows are probably the single most important building feature that affects compliance with the energy code. But there's a lot of other stuff, floor areas. Make sure the walls seem reasonable and stuff like that. Okay. And we have a checklist. I'll get this to you. It's called What to Check on a CF1R. All right. It's a checklist. Then, as the house is being built, I highly encourage building inspectors to coordinate with the HERS raters. Find out who the HERS rater is on a project. Call that HERS rater. Say, hey, when are you going out to do the blower door test? I'd like to see you do the blower door test. When are you going to go out and do the duct leakage test? I'd like to see that. Hey, I want to watch you do your QII inspect. So I learn more about how to install insulation or how insulation should be installed correctly. Okay. get to know building departments really should get to know the HERS raters in your area. The HERS raters are special inspectors working on behalf of the building department. And so get to know your local HERS raters. Before issuing a certificate of occupancy, go into the registry and make sure all the forms are filled out. Very important. Very, very important. Very easy. Okay. You go to the registry, you find your project, you open up a form called the project status report, and you just look for green check marks. That's all you do. If you see any red X's, they're not done. And then you send them an email, say, hey, can't file this project until those red X's go away. It's that simple. Okay. Best practices for HVAC changeouts. Require a registered CF1 or Alto 2 at the time of permit application. Not all building departments do this. A lot of them do, but not all do. It can cause a little bit of stress on the part of the applicant. If they go in to apply for a permit, you go, hey, where's your CF1R? And they say, oh, I didn't know I needed that now. Okay. Some building departments have computers set aside where they can fill it out right then and there. They have little podiums and stuff like that to make it easier for them. But just make it known in advance if you're going to require that. Okay. If no HERS tests are required, confirm those exceptions. If they come in and say, yeah, I'm replacing a furnace, I don't need to do any HERS tests, make sure that that's true. Okay. Make sure you can find the project in the registry. If they do give you a CF1R, go into the registry, make sure it's there. Okay. Tell the installing contractor that you'll be requiring all the forms, that you're going to make sure that everything gets filled out. You're going to be using the registry. You're going to be using the project status report, and you're going to make sure there's all green check marks there. Just that puts them on notice that they need to get all that stuff done. Before closing out a project, go into the registry and actually look to make sure that it has all green check marks. Okay. Get to know your local HERS raters. All right. Okay. Best practices for non-res tests. Require an NRCC at the time of permit application. That's pretty standard. Most building departments do that. That's the non-res certificate of compliance. On that NRCC, it will tell you which NRCV forms are required. Okay. If there's none required, make sure that's true. Make sure you can find the project in the appropriate registry if they are required. Tell the installing contractor you'll be requiring all the forms before closing out the project. Make sure those forms get filled out. And with non-res, there's only like 2 or 3. Okay. But I'm not going into the part about the acceptance testing. The acceptance testing is kind of like HERS testing. There's a bunch of acceptance tests. Okay. Right now, we're only talking about HERS stuff. There's just a couple forms for non-res projects. Okay. Let's actually look at a HERS registry now. Okay. As of late last year, I want to say August or September of last year, there were 2 big HERS providers, Cheers and CalCerts. Okay. And to a great, big, huge surprise to everybody, CalCerts shut their doors. They just one day said, no, we don't exist anymore. You've got a month or 2 to move all your projects out and we're done. We've had enough. Okay. To be perfectly blunt, they weren't treated fairly by the Energy Commission and they were tired of it. And so they said, heck with it. And they left. All right. Which left Cheers. So Cheers has been around for a long time. So Cheers is the main HERS registry. From a building department perspective, it's probably a good thing. Now you just have one registry to worry about. Okay. I did mention earlier that there's another one coming around. I'm just not sure how big they're going to be. But for now, it's Cheers. Okay. So building departments have direct access to registered documents within their jurisdiction through the HERS registry. You have to sign up. All right. You got to get a username and password. I highly recommend that every individual in the building department who may at any point in time have to access the HERS registry get their own username and password. Okay. They will confirm that you really are a building department personnel, either by your email. Sometimes it's very obvious by your email, but some people work for like the Wildans and the Four Leafs of the world. And so they'll have to, Cheers has to make sure that, that person is legitimate because they get access to a lot of projects. All right. Okay. So let's kind of walk through a project. All right. So here's the Cheers registry. It's a Cheers. There it is, cheers.org. All right. Just bookmark it. Once you put in your username and password, just say save, and then you'll never have to enter it again. Okay. So once you get in to the HERS project, okay, or the HERS registry, sorry. I mentioned CalSTRS closed their doors last year, so let's look at cheers.org. So you get here, all right. And if you want to register as a building department, you can register there. All right. There's a register button. All right. Then, oh, also, so you know, the registry also has a whole bunch of training. There's tons of articles and videos for building departments and everybody. All right. So just so you know, that's all there. It gives you kind of walks you through the process. Okay. But now, oh, and I'm sorry, I'm still in videos. Here's all the different videos. So like, here's how to register as a building department. Here's how building department verification, how to read the project status report. Those are videos specifically for building departments. Okay. Everything else is just kind of generic, mostly for other kinds of users. Okay. Okay. Now, how to find a project. Log into the registry and you'll see this search bar. I recommend you start by address. That seems to be the easiest way to find a project is by street number and street name. Okay. And then you'll see it on there. Then you'll click on that project. Once it comes up, you go, oh, here it is. You'll click on it. And right off the bat, it tells you whether it's complete or not. Okay. There's a green or a blue. All right. But you click on it and it opens this screen. This screen is called the project status report. It is a very simplified report showing the name of all the general information, the name of the project, the address, all that good stuff. Okay. And whether or not the forms are complete. This one, you don't even have to look at the list of forms. It tells you, boom, right off the bat, it's all done. 2 green check marks at the top, you're done. You're good to go. But if it's not all complete, um, there's a list of all the forms, and each individual form will tell you whether it's complete or not. All right, so let's look at that. So, oh, you can download a hard copy of this report, by the way. And when you download it, look, there's a QR code on there. So when you download a hard copy, and this is kind of a cool thing. Some building departments will say, I want to see a hard copy of the project status report at the project when I show up to do my inspection. Okay. And then it's there and they scan it and they look at it and say, yep, it's all good to go. They can look at it online or they can just check it. Okay. Anyways, this QR code is a shortcut to get to this form online is basically what it is. Okay. All right. So you can download it. Okay. You got that. All right. The first thing when you open it up, boom, there it is. Complete. It's ready to go. But what if you open it up and one of those is not complete? What you're going to see is a red X. You're either going to see a green check mark or a red X. Right? Scanning through, here's the project status report. We blacked out this information. This is actually a real project status report. Okay. Here's a list of all the forms. Here's a CF1R, all the CF2Rs. There's one for HVAC, duct leakage, fan efficacy, airflow rate. Here's the CF3Rs by the rater. Okay. And at one single glance, you can scan down and go, oh, look, all green dots. That's what you want to see. It's that simple. That's what you want to see. Okay. If they're not all green dots, you're going to see something like this. Oh, they didn't fill out these 2 forms yet. If you see red X's, don't final the project. Okay. And you can send them a message. If you see a red X and you say, oh, they were expecting me to final this project today. But I see a red X. What do? Do I just wait for those X's to change? No, you can actually send them a message and it'll send a message to the person who's responsible for that project. And all you have to say is can't final until the red X's go away. That's all you have to say. All right. And then hopefully somebody will start taking some action and go into the registry and fill those out, sign those forms, make sure they get filled out, all that good stuff. And hopefully those red X's turn into green dots or green check marks. Okay. So there's a good way to communicate. Okay. Very simple. From the building department's perspective, the HERS registry is super simple. It's not so much for everybody else. They've got to fill out all the forms. The building department, all they have to do is make sure they get filled out. Okay. Let me put it this way. If every building department in the state, if the only thing they did was make sure that all those green check marks were there, we'd have a huge improvement in enforcement of the energy code. That's all they did. Okay. Now, once you do start doing that, and once you get good at it and used to it, then I encourage you to then start actually going in and looking at those forms just out of curiosity, if nothing else. All right. They signed off, they said, yeah, they passed the duct leakage test. Wouldn't it be interesting to know what their target duct leakage was and what they actually tested out at? That's all in those forms. Okay. But at the very, very least, make sure those forms get filled out. I'll be the first to tell you, I'll be the first to admit that people will sign anything, whether it's true or not. Okay. But at the very least, they're signing a document saying they did something correctly. And if they're lying, they could lose their license. That's perjury. Okay. But at least you go in and you say, okay, here I know who's responsible for this energy feature. Okay. At the very, very least. So it does help quite a bit. All right. Some additional resources. By the way, I mentioned a couple handouts. When I send a copy of these slides to 3C Rent, I'll make sure those handouts get in there as well. There's a checklist and some other stuff that's in there, but there's some other resources that are useful too. Energy Code ACE is a great organization. They do a lot of work and they put together these really cool fact sheets and trigger sheets and stuff like that. So be sure to check out Energy Code ACE. They have one specifically for alterations that says, okay, if you're doing this and this, here's what needs to be done. Okay. It's a nice table that says, like if you're doing this, replacing air handler unit or furnace, yes means you'll have to meet the efficiency. Yes means you have to do duct leakage, and then everything else says no. So it's very simple, easy to use. Okay. Oh, this is the 2019. That's just out of date. So go to their website, Energy Code ACE. They have a bunch of tools, they have a bunch of training, they have a bunch of resources. Energy Code ACE has a copy of the energy code where everything has been converted to hot links. And what that means is, if you download the energy code from the California Energy Commission, the energy code references a whole bunch of other code sections within itself. Well, they've taken that and they've made those code sections hot links. So if you go in and it said this code references another section, you click on that section and guess what? That section pops up so you can see it. So it's very, very handy. So they've done a nice job. What would you call that? Electrifying, digitizing. They've digitized the energy code very well. So it's a very cool. Which one is that? That is under Navigator ACE, I believe. Yeah. So, anyways, good stuff there. Bayron, we have a whole bunch of training. You're welcome to take Bayron classes regardless of where you're located. This was a Bayron class. You can go there. 3C Ren also has great training, of course, and they'll give you some information at the end of the class. And Energy Code ACE, they have training too. The Energy Code ACE classes tend to be longer and much more involved. Okay. They have all day classes. If you want to take an all day class on a topic in the energy code, more power to you. And they do a great job. All right. Any final questions? Let me see. Nothing in the chat. If anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. Other than that, we will go ahead and turn it back to Baron. Looks like Paula has a question.
Russ, would you mind if we save questions just for the very end? I'll get through these couple of
Oh,
slides
sure.
quickly.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Paula, we'll remember that you had a question.
Yes. All right, thanks so much. Let me just resize my window very quickly so I can see my notes. Thanks so much, Russ, for an awesome training and everyone for coming in today. And before we pass things back to Russ for questions, I have a few slides for you guys. You also may have noticed that I launched our Zoom poll. It really helps us out if you guys can fill this out. It's only a couple of questions. It should only take you a few minutes. And it really helps us with developing and planning new training courses. So if you guys liked this, want to see more like it, or have any other ideas for different trainings in the future, let us know here. We do read all the responses, and they're very influential in helping us develop new courses. And then a little bit about our Code Coach service. 3C Rand partners with Imbalance Green Consulting to offer this awesome service. It's totally free to everyone in the Tri-County area. If you have any questions about the energy code, you can email or call our energy code coach, and they can get back to you very quickly with answers to any of your questions. You can keep going. Thank you. If you have any questions about receiving AIA or ICC learning units for this course, please email Danica. Her email is on the slide, but you'll also be getting these slides in your email in the next few days, so you don't need to write it down right away. We have a lot of great upcoming courses this month. You can see them all, or just a selection of them listed out here. We also have the next installment of our Energy Code Implementation Series coming up in June 25th. These have been really popular, and I hope to see some of you guys there. And with that, I'll pass things back to Russ for questions.
Yes. Let's see.
Hi, my question was, and I don't know if you want to speak to this, but you mentioned the new registry coming out for, I believe you said residential alterations. But you didn't say the name. Are you going to tell us who that is, or is that like a to be announced type of situation?
No, it's GSR. I was drawing a blank at the time. Now I remember what it was. It's GSR, Golden State Registry. Yeah, GSR.
Okay.
Make sure I got it right. Yeah. My understanding is that they are only going to be focusing on a few production home builder, or sorry, a few regions at first, and eventually they plan to grow. But it's mostly HVAC changeouts at this time. Yeah, Golden State Registry.
Do you know
They got
those regions?
I don't. No, I don't. I just remember I'm on the mailing list for the Energy Commission, and I saw a whole bunch of stuff come through as they were getting approved. And then I just saw recently I believe at the last Energy Commission business meeting, they got approved. And I've not heard anything other than that about them.
No start date.
No, but I imagine if you Googled their website, they would probably have information on that. Yeah, Golden
Thank
State
you.
Registry. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Russ, we've got
Well,
a couple of
GSR.
questions
Yeah.
in the chat, and you just got to
Yep.
those.
Got it. Do you have a checklist for refrigerant charge verification? Ooh, good question. I believe Cheers does. Cheers has a checklist for it. Then I presume you mean other than the CF3R form. There was a flow chart in the appendices of the residential compliance manual. There was a pretty good flow chart that kind of walked you through the process. But I believe Cheers, I know CalCerts used to have one, but I believe Cheers should have one as well. Will GSR certify their own HERS raters as well? Yeah, that's the plan. They got their training program approved, they got their registry approved, and then they got their overall program approved. And I'm pretty sure they're a rater can join with them and get approved by them and through them. But I'm not sure if you're already a rater with Cheers, for example, if you have to take a test again or get trained or whatever. I don't know what that process is, but like a new person coming in to be a rater can get trained and certified through Golden State as well. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, please take the survey, and notice that you have to scroll down to see all the questions. Appreciate your feedback on that. If there's any more questions, you can type them into the chat or raise your hand.
Good job on the presentation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was an email, I think it was like.
If we don't have any other questions, we can maybe wrap things up a little bit early. Thanks so much, Russ. This was really informative.
Yeah.
And thanks so much everyone for coming today. And a lot of you filled the survey, so I appreciate that. All right. So no more questions I'm seeing in the chat, so I'll wrap things up here. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.